The aviation industry is undergoing a revolution. For years, airlines were limited by a simple rule. To fly long distances, you needed a large aircraft. But that's changing. Thanks to aircraft like the Airbus A321XLR and the Boeing 737 MAX, airlines can now profitably connect distant cities with smaller, more efficient narrow-body aircraft. It's a radical shift, and airlines around the world are seizing the opportunity. United, JetBlue, Aer Lingus, all are using these jets to open new transatlantic routes. But there's one major airline that's completely ignoring this trend. Delta Airlines has made it clear it will not operate transatlantic flights with narrow-body aircraft. And while this might seem like a missed opportunity, the reasoning behind it is actually quite smart.
If you're also passionate about the world of aviation, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting our team.
To understand why Delta's decision is so significant, we first need to talk about what's currently happening in the sector. For decades, flying across the Atlantic meant one thing: wide-body aircraft. The Boeing 767, the 777, the Airbus A330. These twin-aisle jets were the only planes with sufficient range and capacity to make transatlantic flights economically viable. But here's the problem with wide-body aircraft. They're expensive to operate and need many passengers to generate profit. As a result, airlines were limited to flying between major hubs. New York to London? Sure. But Nashville to Dublin? No way. There simply wasn't enough demand to fill a 300-seat wide-body aircraft on that route. But then, everything changed. In the last decade, aircraft manufacturers developed a new generation of narrow-body aircraft with truly impressive range. The Airbus A321LR and more recently the A321XLR can fly up to 11 hours non-stop. That's enough to connect most cities in the eastern United States to most cities in Europe. Boeing 737 MAX series, while not having quite as long a range, can also operate on many transatlantic routes. And here's the crucial point: these aircraft are significantly more efficient than their wide-body counterparts. Per seat, narrow-body aircraft like the A321XLR can be up to 30% cheaper to operate than a Boeing 787 or an Airbus A350, for example. This efficiency has opened up an entirely new world of possibilities. Airlines can now profitably operate what the industry calls thin and long routes. Routes where there's demand, but not enough to fill a wide-body aircraft. Take JetBlue's case, for example. It's been operating A321 flights from New York to London since 2021 and recently expanded its operations to Paris and Amsterdam. United is using narrow-body aircraft to connect Newark to smaller European cities like Porto and Bergen. Aer Lingus will launch A321XLR service from Nashville to Dublin in 2025. These are routes that would have been impossible just a few years ago. With all this momentum, with narrow-body aircraft revolutionizing transatlantic travel, why on earth would Delta refuse to participate? Well, according to Delta's president, it all comes down to brand and product. In his words, "We have chosen not to fly single-aisle aircraft transatlantically because of product and brand issues, and so we're not going to go in that direction." At first glance, this might sound like corporate speak, but when we analyze what he's actually saying, we realize there's a lot of strategic thinking behind it. Delta has spent decades building a reputation as a premium airline. It's not a low-cost carrier and doesn't want to be mistaken for one. When passengers book a Delta flight to Europe, they expect a certain level of comfort and service. Lie-flat seats in business class, a premium economy cabin, spacious galleys with quality meal service, and most importantly, they expect the intangible feeling of flying on a real international aircraft. This is where narrow-body aircraft run into problems. By their very nature, they're more cramped. A narrow-body aircraft has a single aisle, which means boarding takes longer, moving through the cabin is more difficult, and the overall atmosphere feels more confined. Compare this to a wide-body aircraft, which has 2 aisles, higher ceilings, and a general feeling of more space. Delta believes that when customers spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a transatlantic ticket, they expect the wide-body aircraft experience. And if Delta started operating narrow-body aircraft on these routes, it could dilute their brand perception. Think of it this way. Say you're a loyal Delta customer who regularly flies from Atlanta to Paris in business class. You're used to the Delta One suites on the A350. Private doors, direct aisle access, plenty of storage space. It's a fantastic product. Now imagine that on your next booking, you end up on a narrow-body A321. Sure, the seat might still recline flat, but everything else is compromised. Less privacy, smaller overhead bins, a tighter galley means slower service. You might leave that flight thinking, Delta isn't what it used to be. And that's exactly what Delta is trying to avoid. But here's what makes all this really interesting. Other airlines are betting that passengers won't care. JetBlue, for example, has built its entire transatlantic strategy around single-aisle aircraft and marketed them as a more modern and efficient experience. United is using single-aisle aircraft selectively on routes where demand doesn't justify using wide-body aircraft, and passengers seem to be accepting it well. So is Delta being overly cautious, or is it seeing something others aren't? Well, I believe the answer lies in understanding Delta's specific customer base and competitive positioning.
Let's talk specifically about what Delta would lose by switching to single-aisle aircraft. First, cabin configuration. Delta's current transatlantic fleet consists mainly of Airbus A330s, A350s, and some Boeing 767s. These aircraft offer 4 classes of service: Delta One Business Class, Premium Select, Comfort Plus, and Main Cabin. Each cabin is carefully designed with the passenger experience in mind. Delta One on the A350, for example, features suites with closing doors. It's one of the best business class products in the world. Premium Select offers more legroom, enhanced meals, and premium amenity kits. It positions itself as an affordable luxury option for those who want more than economy class but can't justify the cost of business class. Now, would all of this fit in a narrow-body aircraft? Technically, yes, but compromises would need to be made. Business class seats would be narrower, the Premium Select cabin would be tighter, and most importantly, cargo capacity would be significantly lower. This matters more than you might think. Transatlantic flights generate substantial revenue from cargo. Pharmaceuticals, electronics, perishable goods. Airlines depend on this cargo carried in the aircraft's belly to boost their profit margins. Delta is also thinking about consistency. When you fly Delta across the Atlantic, you know what to expect. Whether on an A330 to Amsterdam or an A350 to Paris, the experience is similar. The same seat types, the same onboard service, the same amenity kits. This consistency is part of Delta's grand promise. If they started using single-aisle aircraft, that consistency would be lost. And then there's the perception factor. Right or wrong, many passengers still associate wide-body aircraft with real international travel. There's something about boarding a large aircraft with 2 aisles that conveys the message, this is a serious flight. It's psychological, but it's real. Delta clearly believes that maintaining this perception is worth more than the cost savings that operating narrow-body aircraft would provide. Of course, Delta's decision isn't without downsides. By refusing to operate single-aisle aircraft on transatlantic flights, the company is essentially limiting its network flexibility. There are dozens of city pairs that could be operated by single-aisle aircraft, but not by wide-body aircraft. Think of smaller U.S. cities like Nashville, Pittsburgh, or Raleigh-Durham with connections to secondary European destinations. These routes could work with an A321 XLR, but are too thin for an A330. By not including single-aisle aircraft in its transatlantic portfolio, Delta is effectively ceding these markets to the competition. United, for example, is completely dominating this segment. They've announced A321 XLR flights from Newark to more than a dozen secondary European cities: Porto, Bergen, Tenerife, Palma de Mallorca. These are routes that would never be served by wide-body aircraft. United is essentially creating an entirely new market segment while Delta remains on the sidelines. There's also the question of frequency. Narrow-body aircraft allow airlines to increase frequency without adding much capacity. Instead of operating one wide-body aircraft per day, you can operate two narrow-body aircraft. But Delta has clearly decided that these trade-offs are acceptable. Its strategy is to focus on major connection hubs and important destinations. Atlanta to London, New York to Paris, Los Angeles to Munich. These are high-volume routes where large aircraft make sense. And by concentrating its efforts here, Delta can offer higher frequency with superior products. So, is Delta making the right decision? Well, as with most things in aviation, it depends on what you value. If your priority is network coverage and serving as many markets as possible, then single-aisle aircraft are clearly the way to go. But if your priority is maintaining a premium brand and offering a consistent, high-quality product, then Delta's approach makes a lot of sense. Here's the thing, Delta isn't trying to please everyone. It's made the calculated decision to prioritize quality over quantity when it comes to transatlantic flights. And for its customer base, especially high-value business travelers and premium leisure travelers, this strategy seems to be working. Delta consistently ranks among the top U.S. airlines in customer satisfaction, and its transatlantic flights remain strong. That said, the competitive landscape is evolving. As more airlines adopt narrow-body aircraft for transatlantic flights, passengers will come to see these smaller aircraft as normal for long-haul flights. The stigma, if there ever was one, is disappearing. 5 years from now, will Delta's insistence on wide-body aircraft still be seen as a premium differentiator? Or will it be seen as an outdated limitation? Only time will tell. But for now, Delta is betting that when it comes to flying across the Atlantic, bigger is better.